What is poppin' Oak Life Familia? It is none other than Greg and Chris and Greg. Craig back at it again with another Roots and Branches episode. And today's message is brought to you in part by good friends at Google who are holding us down with this ecosystem. Love them or hate them, they're helping us do Oak Life. So right on Google. Chris, what are we talking about today?
Talking about food. I don't know.
Yes.
Actually, I haven't eaten anything all day long, so this is going to be torture. I'm going to have to eat some food right after we get done. But
What
yeah,
is your snack of choice, Chris?
snack.
Yeah.
I'm a snacker, so it depends on the time of day and what's in our pantry. But crackers, chips and dip, chips and guac. Can go to town on some chips and guac. How about you? What's your favorite snack?
Pistachios. I love them and I hate them because I can't stop eating them once I start. But yep, that and my good old H2O canister brought to you in part by Lyrical Opposition. Yeah,
How
that's my
did
snack of choice, man.
You got a lot of sponsors, man. You got a Good Hop hoodie, Google.
Yeah,
I don't know if these
it's
people are
holding it
paying
down.
you.
I wish. Sheesh kebab. Can we make that happen? Can we get some sponsorships, man?
I don't know if we're allowed to as a church tax wise. It has to be under the table, which I'm cool with.
All good, man. All good, dude.
I
Let's do
didn't
it.
know
Let's
that
let's
cashews were your snack of choice. Is that like
pistachios.
or pistachios? My bad. Is that your yeah? Like, don't you call these cashews? Is that like a healthy
Facts.
choice or is that like a
No, it's for me similar to any fans of sunflower seeds. Something about the tiny bit of effort that goes into popping that shell. It's like an activity. It's not just mindless eating. You got to
Mhm.
pop it a little bit, and then it just makes the reward all the more worth it. And they come in a bunch of different flavors. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's just super good. I
Okay?
mean, don't get me wrong, chips and dip, bro. I'll go down on some
I
chips and
know,
dip,
I
but
know.
these are just they're less messy. I don't feel as bad after eating them.
That's good. Okay, what about like a substantial meal? Like, what's your go-to if you could eat one meal every day? Not doing like if you could only eat one thing, but if like every day you could eat this meal in addition to other stuff, like what would be that meal and why?
Are you ready for another sponsor? Rico Taco in Oakland, off of Lake Shore. Oh my gosh, they have fed me consistently during this quarantine, and even as things are opening up, I find myself going back and getting that good old shrimp burrito, no dairy. It is lovely. Highly recommended. Highly recommended.
Rico's. I've never been. I don't think I've ever been there. Are they new?
I don't know. I don't
Huh.
know. I didn't know about them until shelter in place. Um, and then we were looking and it was like Rico Taco. Never been there before. We tried the burritos and they make their tortillas in house, so they're fresh made tortillas, and that's
Yep.
definitely what stands them apart from any other burrito or taco spot because their fish tacos are pretty good too.
For sure. Um, yeah, man, I'm hungry. So
Sorry, bro.
the reason we were talking about food is because we're going to be doing communion this Sunday and starting kind of a project as a church during pandemic, where every Sunday we are going to close out our service with community, or it'll be in the service in some way. And that's different for us. We used to do it like once a month, once every so often, once a series. But in this time of isolation, it might be something that can really keep us together. And it's an experience that highlights the essentials of our faith and what we esteem to live into, uh, through like a tangible thing. It's not just something on a screen, but it's like we get to taste and touch, and so we'll be experimenting with that. But it's like there's something about food that is like sacred. Food isn't just like, I don't know. It's not just a burrito. Like it's a relationship with, like you were talking about, they make their stuff in the kitchen, like on site, and so you like you have this connection to the farmers, to the growers, to the land, to the animals. I think we're like our kind of grocery store culture, like we're disconnected from all that stuff. But that's, I think, food is like that. Um, and yeah, so what do you remember? What's been your experience with communion, Greg? Like growing up, I know you started like most of your Christian experience was Catholic in your like childhood, and then later on, more contemporary Protestant kind of church. But yeah, what's been your experience with communion, Eucharist?
Yeah. Remember going to the Catholic Church, All Saints Church in Hayward, holding me down. And I wasn't confirmed yet. So I remember walking up to the people, like I'd get in line, follow somebody, I'd get up to the cup, and I would do like this, and then the person would look at me, and I'll just walk past, and then I sit back down. That was it. Did that for a while. I was confirmed at 16, and then I felt like a big kid because I was able to take part. Um, and that was I knew nothing about why we did it, and maybe someone told me, and I just didn't retain that information. And then fast forward to later, um, early 20s, I was going to a church in the peninsula, and they had these cool little like cups. It had like the juice in there and the cracker right on top, and we was like, "Oh, this is cool." So we did that every now and then, and I would hand them out, and I'd make sure I'd go to the music team and put a little cup, with a little cracker on the top. Make sure you have that after you're done playing. And it didn't have the like the meaning behind it, the punch, the reason why we do it. It didn't resonate with me like in those earlier times. It was just like, hey, this is a way of remembering that Jesus died for you. And it's like, that's essentially it, but it's also more at the same time. And it wasn't until we started doing our communion, by our, I mean Oak Life, in your apartment, the 12 of us, passing the loaf around, and it just started to be much more than that. So, yeah, that's my story.
That's good. And all those experiences are valid. Like one of the things I like about the different traditions, different denominations within Christianity, everybody does it in some form. It's like it's one of the things that unites all Christians is like this practice, this ritual. And you touched on like there's times where it's meaningful, there's times where it's not. I think that could be true of every ritual. Like if it loses its heart, it just becomes an empty action. And so I think historically the church has like swung back and forth from that. Part of the reason, like when I came to faith late in my teenage years, like we barely did communion. I think that was a response to it being like an overly um, like rigid, empty ritual. Um, but it's also because that's also one of the things like the church has fought over. So there's like huge fights over who can do communion, who can like lead it, um, what it is, like the biggest fight there with like the Protestants and the Catholics, the transubstantiation. Have you gotten into this word in seminary? Yeah. Like
A
it
little bit.
is the body and blood of Jesus, like it miraculously becomes that, or it's a symbol of that. And people get like all heated in that one. And to me, it's like, yeah, it's kind of both. You don't have to have the answer. It's something. Um, yeah. Out of the times you've taken communion, is there like what was I don't know what's like the most memorable one, or like has there been times where it's kind of stood out as like we did this and that was really special, or like this time we did it in chapter 510 or in somebody's house, or like or this time somebody led it and said this that kind of stuck with me. Anything memorable?
The two times, one of which I already stated, in the early
Mm-hmm.
Oak Life years, um, when we started doing it during the Bible study, and then at chapter 510 during worship nights. For some reason, it just hit harder when we would get there and sing songs, and it wasn't like a message necessarily, or I don't know. I guess there was a little more novelty to it. Maybe that was part of it. Maybe it was because Spirit was kicking butt that night. But for whatever reason, those two circumstances were the two that were most memorable.
Yeah, it's cool. Have you ever taken communion with not like carbs and juice, like carbs and grape?
Is there another way to take communion?
Yeah, like So actually, a lot of in the pandemic, I've seen a lot of churches like they'll tell people like, "Oh, get it ready," and or they'll take it with their kids. And like today, we're using goldfish and apple juice, um, or something, right? Uh, I did a wedding. Two Asian Americans were getting married, and they did communion. They wanted to do communion together, and it was tea and rice. And it was like the tea was a particular tea that like their family drank. One of the people's families um, regularly used. So it was connecting their family to it all. Um, yeah, can you hear that? Is that a loud motorcycle?
Not super loud.
Oh, nice, good.
Should be okay.
Um, yeah, so I mean, I'm of the disposition that it's like all meals can be communion. Like every time you eat and drink, you're receiving something that died for you, in a sense, or gave its life, or gave life so that you could be nourished and have life. So I kind of have like a very decentralized view of communion, and like I remember early on at Oak Life when we were starting to like do it, somebody else led it, and they're like, should I make sure people like have confessed their sin before they take it? There's this part in the New Testament where Paul says like, you should be cautious. Like I don't know what the exact language is, but basically like check yourself before you take this, because you'll like bring a curse upon yourself if you don't. And I think the heart is reverence. Like, hey, this shouldn't be done haphazardly, but at the same time, I'm like, no, it's the point is that it's grace for all. Like, and yeah, yep. I'm gonna riff out one last second. Sorry.
Yo, do
Communion
it.
is one of my favorite things to think about. But the history that it's in the terms of the religious scene, it's super subversive because uh, in the Jewish tradition, which we are indebted to fully for like all of our metaphors and rituals. Um, but in the Jewish tradition, like many other religions, there's like a centralized space where the deity existed, and it was the Holy of Holies. And so, if you've ever heard people talk about like the temple and who could get access to this Holy of Holies, it's always like the priestly class. It's like usually just men. And on the outside of the temple, it's more inclusive for all people and women and Gentiles, whatever. Um, but there's like sacred acts that would happen inside the temple. And so it's this highly centralized, protected thing. And Christianity like flips that with communion and says like, actually, the deity doesn't exist in this place you have to clean up to get to, but the God exists every time you eat and drink in your homes, and nobody has power or control over that. It's just free everywhere. And so the early Christians started doing communion, and it became like a thing. We don't know how they did it, like in the first century exactly, like because once you get out of Israel, you don't know if they had like Passover bread or whatnot, or if like because they started to do it every meal. It basically became like a meal. People would like get drunk at it and like all sorts of things. There's all sorts of things that happened in the first church first century, but they always had this sense that like they ate and drank and remembered Christ's death to give them life. To the point where people outside Christianity called them cannibals. Like, what is this weird religion that like eats their God? So it's a funky one, but it's like a really weird. Communion is like a weird thing if you think about it, but really beautiful too.
That's good, man.
Sorry, had to riff out there.
No, dude, I love it. That's good stuff, man. It's insightful. Insightful. I wanna hear you riff out a little more. You touched on it in the beginning, but why is it that we're shifting our frequency and putting attention towards communion on a more weekly project basis?
Um, Lots of reasons I think, and when we brought this up and talked through it, we're kind of on the like same page. Like, yeah, this is a good move. I think given all the chaos, having some consistent, like repetitive and simple things to do, like to keep us grounded in the basics and like the heart of our faith, and I think that's a good thing. And then also it's like I mentioned earlier, it's more of an experience. I think we're in like a highly emotional moment in history, and I don't know if we need more data or like logic to solve things. Like I think there are lots of people writing. There's so much content out there. I think something like a ritual like this, when I say ritual, just like an act that has tradition to it that points us to a deeper meaning. Something like this brings us out of just the headspace into something more emotional. It's an experience versus a teaching or an idea. It's an experience. So tasting, touching, like all that smelling is a part of that. And so there's that, and then also because it's something we can do together, we can find ways to like that we can't meet in person. We can Some of us might be able to eat from the same loaf of bread that we bake. We're going to be putting out like a recipe, like just a basic bread recipe that everyone can tweak or whatever. But it'd be like how cool it'd be if we're all eating from the same recipe. Um, and I think somebody had like a starter for sourdough bread. They might be like offering and passing around, so we could like all be eating the same bread. And the idea that of baking that like with your house, with your family, with your roommate or whatever, or alone, but baking that in unity. Like it's not just we're sitting and looking at a screen. We're doing something, um, something that is so profound and deep and historical and beautiful. So it just feels like the right move. And I would say, based on like the quick conversation we had around it, it was like felt like a God thing. Like, oh yeah, this is God saying this is a good thing for your church to do right now. Yeah, what were your thoughts
Yeah.
on it?
Well, originally, like when, as you alluded to, we were having conversations and stuff, just trying to figure things out. And I had a more drastic approach to things that we should do regarding Sunday and engagement and stuff like that. But ultimately, uh, how can we engage more and simplify how we engage? To your point about church being this idea that is content that a church organization provides for a congregant consumer, like how do we steer away from that? Um, there are certain elements that will kind of have that vibe and that feel, and that's all good. But how can we put more energy and insight and input into simplifying everything on a more consistent and more engaging basis? So when you brought that idea up, I was like, brilliant. There's I can't think of another way to simply focus on something that is engaging and brings us to the heart of why we do this, why we walk this path of faith and love. So yeah, I was like, brilliant idea, love it, definitely a God thing. I'm all on board. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun and hopefully tasty. Um, and like we're really hoping folks will like send us pictures or post on Instagram or something for us to like see it together. Um, just letting us into that experience. And as you're like baking, you could be praying for a church, and we'll have some sort of little devotional to go along with it. But yeah, what a beautiful thing.
Yeah, shout out to Behold Creators for all of the amazing video editing that Oak Life is a part of. I'm coming after you because I'm having fun learning how to video edit in this quarantine, putting services together. And to that point, please, please, please take pictures of yourself. If you do decide to bake this bread, take pictures, record something on your phone, send me all the footage because I want to put together something for this because I'm excited about it.
Yeah, the next one will be how do we do like whatever the juice is or wine people want to use? How do we make that communal? Like, and that so the bread's kind of the first experiment. We'll try to figure this out. I think it'll take a few weeks for us to find a rhythm, but the
You
juice
know
will come
somebody
after.
who makes wine. You know
I know
someone who
somebody who
makes wine
sells wine.
themselves.
Oh, I do know people who make wine actually.
Exactly.
Yeah, Mike and
Exactly.
Donna.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
do like, and they bake bread too. Um, but we'll do the bread first. Let's see how this goes,
Yeah.
and then we'll build
Steps.
this out
Baby steps.
because it could be one of the most significant things we do as a church in this time. Is just we eat bread and drink together, alone together, separate together. So yeah,
Eating and baking as a revolution.
yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, and maybe that's the next series we do too. When we first started Oak Life, we did a whole series on, and it was too short. We just did like 4 weeks of it, but we did it on the all the meals that Jesus ate and the times where he was with people eating in some form, and just kind of highlighted those stories and the ramifications for them. And it's crazy. Okay, are you sweets person? Are you a savory person? Are you a no discrimination on seafood person?
I'm an equal opportunist calorie consumer. I don't do dairy. I don't do land or air meat. I do underwater meat, and um, yeah, and don't do guacamole. But that's all of like allergy related issues. Other than that, take it all.
Yeah, I
How about
support you
yourself?
in the I support you with the meat stuff. I grieve for you without like not being able to eat guacamole. Like that just makes me sad.
Yeah, well, my body just pushes it back out. I mean, nothing I can do about it. Nothing
It's
I can do
about
about it.
building a tolerance, Greg. So you gotta over
Start
time.
small, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what happens when I start small, but I'll
No,
tell you
please
another
don't.
time for two
Yeah.
reasons. Because today is not the day, and we should wrap this thing up, man. People got to go. People
Cool.
got to go. Any closing thoughts on food or engagement or anything of the sort?
Nope. Do you? Communion, food, thoughts.
Um, last question. What food do you despise? There's got to be something. Don't get Chris
Despise.
Scott this.
I I don't like it typically, on except for exceptions. Uh, Dessert shouldn't have things like raisins or nuts, unless like again there are exceptions and they're like as like a garnish, but like don't put raisins in cookies. That's dumb.
Not even oatmeal cookies, bro.
No,
Oatmeal and
no,
raisin cookies,
definitely
bro.
don't like
Aw,
raisins, and most of the time don't like nuts and cookies, um, and like fruit in my desserts. Like no,
bro.
again
I
with rare
couldn't
occasions.
disagree
Sometimes,
more.
like, do you like apple pie?
I like apple pie. I like
What's your favorite part of the
but
apple
I
pie?
love the crust.
Yeah, the
My
crust.
favorite part of any pie is the crust.
That's my point.
Um, well, I'll say this: if I get ice cream, I want nuts and caramel in it. If I'm gonna get ice cream, I want it. If I get cookies and they have like walnuts in them, bonus. I'm all for the I like nuts in my salad. I mean, I guess yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, agree to disagree.
All right, fam. If you are watching, light up those comments. We want to know what your favorite foods are and what your favorite foods aren't, or anything else you want to hear us talk about. That's pretty much it for Chris and Greg. Greg and Chris. Craig with Roots and Branches. Any closing word you want to leave these good people with?
Love you all. Miss you all. Thanks for not sucking.
Yes. Don't suck, people. Love you. Peace out.